Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting our students to learn what we teach. And I am Rob Alvarez. I'm the founder of Professor Game and professor of gamification and games-based solutions at IE Business School, EFMD, EBS University, and many other places around the world. And if this content is for you, then please go ahead and subscribe to our email list for free at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, engagers, and welcome to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have Kevin with us today. But before we take off, Kevin, we need to know, are you prepared to engage?
Oh, I'm ready.
Let's do this, because we have Kevin Reste with us today. Reste, is that the way to pronounce it?
Yep. You're one of the few people to get it right the first time. Good job.
So Kevin Reste is a creative operations specialist artist and producer focusing on integrating new technologies into existing production pipelines. His expertise focuses where art, media, and technology intersect and influence each other. And he's been in the game world as well for a while and in all sorts of interactive technology. So Kevin, thank you very much for being with us today. However, is there anything that we're missing? Anything you want to make sure the audience knows before we get into the questions?
No, that's the pretty in a nutshell. That is my career. I like to bounce between those three things: media, art, and technology, and figure out how all those things play really well together and affect the rest of our lives. So that's the best way to put it.
Media, art, and technology always sounds to me like a game. So I have a interest on seeing it that way. But anyways, Kevin, we would like to know, what does a day with you look like? We always like to get to know our guests a little bit better. So again, a day in the shoes or whatever you want to go for.
So currently I'm working in the XR space with a client, WebXR.tools. We're rolling out a product to allow people to create their own AR, VR, XR experiences with a toolkit that has like no code. And we're just trying to smooth out the whole process to remove the developer and the heavy lifting in the middle that's keeping creatives from getting more into the XR space. So currently my process is, my day is creative development. So currently we're trying to reach out to artists, get our tool into the hands of artists. I'm spending time talking to people, looking at projects, seeing what people are trying to create with XR, seeing where people think that space is going right now, and trying to cater to them and trying to figure out how can we get these creatives that right now are working in games and CG, how we can have them take that little half step and bring some of their stuff more into the real world.
What do you mean when you say
XR.
CG? Sorry?
Well, see, computer graphics. So the idea behind our tools is that everything right now works on a base knowledge of computer graphics. So everything is meshes and rigs and, animation. And we have this common language between all of the fields. All of the current people that are working in CG with a couple of new tools can now bring all of their existing work, all of the stuff that they do day to day, they can bring that into the real world.
Huh. Interesting. Very much looking forward to knowing a little bit more about that. But before we get and dive into such a project, we like to start with a question about the tough times. About one of those initiatives, projects, call it as you may, where you were going north, things went south. Let's say that it was your favorite fail or first attempt at learning, right? Can we be there with you? And especially, of course, if it involves interactive media, XR, AR, games, whatnot. We want to be there, take some lessons away from that, because we want to, take some of that experience and maybe incorporate it into our daily lives.
As far as failure, I have unending lists of them, because that's what working in new technology and art kind of is you try things, they break, you try things again, they fall apart. And working in large teams, the biggest advice I could give, the biggest piece of information I could give anybody who's trying to get into this or who's in it and had struggling is it all comes down to communication. That is the number one thing that I can really offer as far as advice. Making sure that your team is going in the same direction, has the same goals in mind, or using the same vocabulary, or talking about things in the same way. That to me is the driving factor to keep something from becoming a bigger failure. It's from becoming completely off the rails. It's keeping everybody on the same page and communicating. So when it comes to actually working, in the day-to-day, I find that teams and people are always very excited about working on the product, working on the thing that you're making. That's always the thing that gets everybody really excited. And we forget that it really is it's like 50-50. Like for every hour you're going to be spending time working on the actual product, on the actual piece in the end, there should be 1 hour of what I call pre-production, or some people call visualization, or, whatever the planning phase of that. It really should be 50-50, almost hour for hour. The time you invest into the planning, into the making the documents, into the making sure that your ideas and your plans are well understandable in stuff you can give your team, it becomes invaluable. So usually what I've learned, and I've learned this from obviously doing it and it failing, where your assets go in different people, different directions. Teammates are working on things with different goals in mind. You spend assets, you spend time, you spend budget, and all of that is lost. So at the beginning of my process, I spend as much time not working on the actual thing as possible. I spend as much time planning out what we're actually going to be. It's here we have a saying, an old saying, it's a measure twice, cut once kind of thing. It's that exact thing. Try to answer as many of the questions before you start working with previs, with things like outlines and thumbnails, storyboards, script run-throughs. Again, my experience runs a lot of gamuts from network television to live broadcast to video games. So my experience, the final product is always different, but I very much find that the pre-production is always the same. And what it really comes down to is just communication. So if you, as the leader of your team, can keep everybody on the same page, moving in the same direction, knowing what we're all working in, it's an exponential gain than everybody getting into the room and starting working on the actual product. We can all sit down, start coding or creating models or animating things, but if they aren't with the purposefulness of a good plan, the whole thing falls apart, and you just bleed resources the entire way.
And Kevin, that sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm just going to ask you a small thing. Is there any time when that actually did not function the way you were expecting? Or maybe how did you learn that that was so important? Because I'm guessing that it had to do with a time when, things were not aligned as you were needing or expecting, and it just didn't go as well. So can you tell us a little bit of that experience? Of course, you don't have to name any names if you don't want to, or you can't. We just want to take out a little bit of the juicy details on the side of how you got to that conclusion, basically.
Absolutely. So applying this system, I have never found that it does not work. Anytime that I have applied this system and it did not work, it comes to, we did not solidify this concept. We did not make it clear. People thought it was blue, but it was a different blue. We did not specify. It always really comes down to a communication issue. And where I learned this experience is actually I spent a lot of time working in very bureaucratic creative environments. So banks, ad agencies, network television. So these creative environments that isn't just a team trying to make something, it's a team that plugs in to this bigger bureaucracy of producers and creative approvals and, bigger clients and, middlemen and things like that. And when I was beginning my career, obviously I was on the bottom end of that, where I'm, the animator or the designer or anything like that. And I cannot tell you how many times me and my colleagues spent weeks working on things that then got thrown away. Weeks working on shots and executing parts of the script then we didn't keep. Not because we ran into something and people decided that, we ran into something, there was an issue, this doesn't work, we're going to have to change it. No. Somebody just didn't do the second draft on the script. Somebody hadn't taken it to the appropriate person to sign off on what we were building before we were building it. And witnessing this in the bureaucratic system where it's hundreds of people on a project, sometimes you just see the waste in skills and value. And now we're not talking, gasoline or, some kind of commodity, but we're talking about people's time and effort. And I can't tell you how many artists I saw get burned out after spending 3-4 weeks putting their, heart and soul into something that, it's going to look right. Oh, we're not using that shot. Why not? Oh, did nobody tell you? We hadn't updated the list yet. Or, some kind of the bureaucracy just bleeds out the talent. And I find that kind of, not even the actual things happening, but that kind of vibe, that kind of energy can be very demoralizing to an artist and therefore a team. And you could end up sucking the actual, because I come from the art side, you can suck out the passion from a team. You can suck out the energy. And that's really what you need to foster to keep projects going well. So again, I like to think about it as fence posts. I lay out the fence posts and then I'll let my artists go crazy in between them. But as long as we all know where the fence posts are, we're going to end up building the right fence in the right area to do the right job, if that makes sense.
Sounds good. Sounds interesting. So let's take those lessons, engagers, and think about that, and the importance of communication with the team. And Kevin, let's actually now go for a time when things did go well, when, you can say that was a proud moment. We would like to be there and experience that with you. Can you tell us of such a story? And of course, we'd like to know of some of the success factors you would attribute to that.
Yeah. So big success stories. When it comes to technology, to this higher end technology, when we're always trying to incorporate something new, again, I said, like, most of the time you end up with failure. Most of the time it's a lot of experimentation. The successes come when you have the plan right, you know where you're going, and therefore with that confidence, you get to throw yourself in completely. So my bigger successes are on the production side, I would say, which is when we've taken on, I've done a lot of visual effects work in my day. I got my start doing A$AP Rocky's music video Goldie. I was the lead VFX artist and color guy on that shoot. When you know what you're doing and you have everything lined up with new technology, you're able to throw yourself into it 100%. You don't know it's going to work, but you know it's going to work, kind of thing, if that makes sense. You have the confidence to push forward. So those are really the moments that I take in production, that I take as my little trophies, is we took on this job. There were too many shots. We didn't know how we were going to even do the effect. We didn't know how we were going to handle the thing, but we have these tools in the background we've been working with. We have this process we've been kicking around. I know we can pull this off, and applying that to the project and being successful, those to me are the best, are bigger than the big projects. They're bigger than the big paychecks. They're bigger than, the more on paper successes. To me are those. It's when, again, because that's my role, is being that middle ground between all the departments and everything. Being able to have the confidence to take that risk is when I find it to be a great success, because it means that I have built the environment and the foundation sturdy enough that my team is able to make that jump, that I'm able to make that jump with confidence. And when you're in the room with a client and you're telling them, yeah, we can do this, but we have no proof, we've never done it before, but we know we can do it, that it's a great feeling to be able to pull that off for them and being able to get them to sign off on letting you take that chance. And, and if you're able to knock it out of the park, like, those are the most satisfying kind of jobs for me.
Sounds very, very good. So Kevin, from all the experience that you've had, I'm sure, and you've kind of mentioned this before, that you have some form of a process that you follow when you're facing a new project. Can you tell us about that process? Of course, in broad terms, you would maybe write a book. Instead of writing a book, give us some general guidelines here about how you would face a new project coming up.
So my strategy, and this goes for every kind of creative project. I don't care if you're making a video game, if you're writing a book, if you're making a comic book, if you're choreographing a dance. To me, it makes absolutely no difference. And my entire process comes from the pre-production books, if you want, the pre-production tradition, which basically is you break your plan down into the smallest pieces possible. And as you progress through those pieces, you answer as many questions as you can possible. So this is very simple. It's a very simple thing. It's as simple as write an outline, then take your outline points and write in each of those points into a scene description, right? And then take each of those scenes and do a style frame. And then take each of those style frames and do a lookbook. By the time you go actually develop anything, you have all of the pieces behind you for it. If that makes sense. Am I being clear about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go through, you develop each piece individually, answer as many questions as you can, so that when you're in the moment working, you have all those questions in your back pocket, right? So you know what the outline is. You know all of the marks you want to hit. You know all of the styles that you want to hit. You know everybody that's going to be in the scene. I'm just spitballing possibilities you could have. But when you know all of those things, then it allows you to make the actual creative decisions and the actual development decisions in the moment, because you have all that. You're not wasting time. Oh, well, how many people are supposed to be in the room right now? How many cameras are we using in this scene? Is this a wide? Do we have these assets in the scene? When you have all of those things documented and ready to roll, it makes your execution that much exponentially faster.
And just a question, because sometimes, the saying of you don't know what you don't know. How do you handle that kind of situations in that process?
That's it. You never know what you don't know. I specifically use this process because of that exact idea. Because when the thing that you don't know, you needed to know shows up, I can deal with that because I've already answered the 9 things that I know, but never asked myself, right? Because a lot of times I find it's really just about making the decision, right? Where does your character go in the second act? What is the, it's just making those decisions. He could go here, he could go there. In the creative process, we want finality. We want, this is where we're going to go. So that everybody that comes after that decision in the creative process can now flex their muscles confidently. Right. Here's where we're putting the camera. We're shooting from this angle. Well, that allows your set designers, it allows your lighting people, it allows everybody else after that decision to now execute really well. If you have your set designers designing a set that you might change the camera to, well, they can't go in as specifically, as detailed, because now they have to leave you the freedom, if you will, to change later. So the more you solidify these decisions, the more concrete your pieces are, the more concrete the next pieces can be. And I got this entire concept actually from Francis Ford Coppola, the director of the Godfather films. My mother-in-law bought me, it's a bounded book. It's a book, but what it is, it's a photocopy of Francis Ford Coppola's binder for shooting The Godfather. And what it is, it's all of his notes, and you can go through it, and it's almost page by page. There's pieces of the book in there. There's actor breakdowns. There's notes he wrote on like napkins that he put together. And with that book on set, well, when he had it, it was a binder. With that binder, he didn't need the script. He didn't need anybody else around. As the story goes, he didn't even need his producers because all of the answers were in that book to make The Godfather. Any shot he walked into, he knew what they were doing, who was supposed to be doing it, what the concept was, what were they aiming for. And it allowed him to just kind of make the movie as he went. So I received this book as a gift many years ago, and it really changed the way I look at the entire process, because I can look at, I'm a big Godfather fan. I find, Coppola is one of the better directors we've ever had. You look through it and you can literally just go through this man's brain process. You'd be like, oh, here is where he decided that that's what they were going to do with this scene. Here is where he decided what was going to be on the table during the conversation. Here's where he decided what they were going to be wearing for that. So all these little details, like you can see the thought process. Oh, he decided on this outfit because it resonates with this piece of the book, because it works with this piece of the costume designer. And you can see it there, all mishmash. It's not a pretty book. It's all literally mishmash. He writes it with paper and there's notes on the side of pages, and it's just like a mess. But to him, it made perfect sense. He was answering all the questions as he was progressing, so that when he got on set, he just filmed the movie.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for sharing that, Kevin. And Kevin, when you're thinking of creating something new in this creative world, especially if it were around games, would you say that there is some form of a best practice? I don't want to call it silver bullet in any way, but something that, at least will help your project be a little bit better than if you didn't do it.
Yes, absolutely. And I was actually just having a conversation with my developer around these XR tools about this exact thing. The one big thing to deal with, the difference when working with games as far as the way you design them versus working with other traditional media, is that with games, you cannot assume what your user is going to do or how your user is going to act in any way. With a book, you can assume they're going to open the book, they're going to flip through the pages. With the movie, they're going to hit play and they're going to watch. But when you're building gaming environments, when you're building gaming experiences, you're allowing that piece to be up to your user. Your user comes in, he makes the decision. They make the decision of how they want to interact in this space, where they're going to go. So a lot of times, if you design a game with too many stringent assumptions of, no, the user's going to show up here and they're going to do this, this, and this, I'm very hesitant of any of that kind of thinking. You have to have a more cradling kind of approach with it, when you have to design things knowing that your user was going to act not how you planned. I always assume that no matter how much planning you've done for the user, you can never guess how they're going to actually act in the space, in the environment you create. So you have to have more of a cushioning, reactionary kind of like, okay, we're going to build this in a way that they have the freedom here. If you tie it down too stringently, I feel like it breaks your experiences. It doesn't allow people to get into them right.
Sounds good. Allowing the players at least a certain sense of freedom and making their own choices. I always like when I'm doing workshops to show people a controller, and I ask them, what is this? It's a controller. Why do players like to play? Well, amongst other things, because they are the ones in control. They are at the center of the story. They are the saviors of the world. They are the ones who control their own actions. Different from, for example, a movie where you could cringe from what a character is doing, but there's literally nothing you can do about it. when you introduce the interaction, that gives it a completely new level. And that's something that you live with when you are living inside a game environment. And that's something you have to plan for. And that, as you were saying, you cannot be too stringent about knowing how they're going to choose, but rather, what are we going to do if they choose this or they choose that? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make a great point. That addition of control, right? That giving them the control, you add a whole new level to the fantasy of it, to that escapism of it, and giving them the control. You also allow them to get. I find games allow people to get deeper into those fantasies than a lot of traditional media because of that participation. It isn't a character doing something; it's you doing something.
Yep.
And like you said, you live with that. Like that's in your soul when you're playing the game.
Amazing. And Kevin, we've been talking for already around 20 minutes about these things on the podcast. Maybe you've had a vibe of what this whole thing is about, and perhaps somebody came to your mind. You say, well, this person would be really interesting talking about these things on Professor Games, sort of a potential future guest for us. Does anybody come to your mind when I say this?
Tons of people come to my mind, honestly, of colleagues of mine. They're more, I'm friends with a lot of background players, so I'm not, headline type names, but there's tons of people I think would come to. A good friend of mine, Alan Michaels, I feel would be a great guest on this podcast. He spent a lot of time working at Rockstar Games and developed, I believe, from GTA 5 forward, so the Red Dead series, LA Noire, several of their big flagship games, some bigger successes, some bigger failures, but he's had some fantastic experience in the gaming industry. I mean, he'd be a fountain of knowledge for you guys.
Sounds good. Alan Michaels, right?
Yes, I can send you his contact after this. Absolutely.
That'd be great. So, Kevin, let's keep up with the recommendations. And how about a book? Is there anything that you would recommend the engagers to get into?
So, I have so many books. I'm actually looking at a bookshelf right now. I have a ton of industry books. I very much recommend, if you're into the idea of pre-production and just that concept, I highly recommend the Godfather Ford Coppola book just as a thought experiment. It's amazing. Just flip through and learn. But other than that, if your team is going into more of the post-production type thing, I'm a huge fan of people picking up the Art and Science of Digital Compositing, which is pretty much the textbook, the Bible, the whatever you want to call it, of all digital post-production. It is insanely valuable as far as just what the basic building blocks of every program everybody's working with. Not this is how it works in Maya or this is how it works in Photoshop, but this is how pixels work. This is how 3D meshes actually work. This is how, triggers work. So it gives you like a baseline of all the building blocks of our industry. So I highly, highly recommend that book. But I will warn your audience, it is extremely dry and it is a textbook. But I definitely recommend checking it out.
Can you repeat the name, because I was trying to catch it? It was something of Science of Digital Composition.
Yeah, it's called The Art and Science of Digital Compositing.
All right, The Art and Science of Digital Compositing.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. And in this interactive experiences world, what would you say is your superpower? That thing that makes you at least better than most other people doing that thing.
So I feel like I'm blessed because of the way technology is going now. We're having a convergence of all of these technologies. I find games to be one of the more interesting words to use to describe it, because I really find that everything is becoming a video game now. Everything is gamified. Every experience is becoming more like a video game than any other type of media. And I find that I'm very well trained for this since my experience is so broad. I'm a developer and I've done animation and I've done post-production and I've done modeling and scanning and AI, 360, all of these things. And now we've taken all of these things and put them into one bucket and we call it XR. Every new media project is really a combination of everything, because games are becoming more like movies and full experiences. You have things like God of War being an entire game that you never have a camera cut. I don't know if that's something you've ever noticed. You play the new God of War, there's no camera cut. It's very cinematic. It's one continuous camera, which is something that we've worked on, in film for a long time. But now we've taken those skills, brought them into games, and we're using them there. Everything we know about CG is being brought in to do these augmented reality experiences. Everything we know about games is being brought in to make these VR experiences work better. You know, like we're mixing everything we know about story, audio, video, everything is getting mixed together with this new generation of tech that we're getting. I'm not exactly sure where it's all going. We're in a very experimental stage with all of this stuff, and it's really a matter of getting it into the hands of creators and users and seeing how you guys react to it. And then, you know, the industry will adapt with this back and forth. But I feel like right now we're in a convergence time. Nobody is just an animator. Nobody is just an editor. It's a convergence of all these skills and abilities that's happening now in the art industry.
Amazing. So converging all those skills into a single person, that would be your superpower.
Very clearly, I am not the one who's the best at all of those skills. I am the one who sees how all of those pieces fit together.
Makes sense.
So when ideally on my team, I am not the best animator. I am not the best developer. I am not the best screenwriter. I'm not the best of any of those things. I'm the one who understands all of them well enough to see how they all fit together. And in a perfect system, I'll be able to bring in better hands than mine to do the individual actual pieces. I set those fence posts so that the people with the more talent and the more energy, the more, pieces, they can put all of their assets into my vision, into our controlled progress through this development.
Sounds good. Sounds great. And now I'm going to put you on the spot, Kevin, because we would like to know, what is your favorite game?
My favorite game, all time or current?
Up to you.
Well, right. Currently, I am very much addicted to Magic the Gathering Arena, which I can't seem to stop playing on my free time. So been a huge Magic the Gathering fan since I was a kid, playing it in the card games, digital version. Now, all time, I would probably have to say the Civilization series. One of those. Pick your poison. I've been playing them my entire life, and I think there's something about turning on a game of Civ and spending 100 hours on one mission trying to conquer the world that just kind of very much satisfies me.
Those sound like very good recommendations. I used to be a Magic the Gathering, the physical card game. I want to say it's almost 20 years ago now when I was back in then, and I'm surprised and amazed and happy that, it's still running strong. Even the physical card game is still something that happens around the world.
Found itself a hole, and that's where when games are good, when experiences are good, when media is good, it finds its space. It resonates with generation after generation. Like these young kids, there was something to it. It resonated with them. It gave them the same kick it gave us when we were kids, and it's still going. And that's that's what we can all hope to make someday, is something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, we are running out of time before we let you go, is there anything else, any final words you'd like to leave us? Please do let us know where we can find out more about you, what you do, what you've done, wherever you want to guide us to, and then we'll say that it's game over.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys can find me on my website, thesketchstudios.com, or across all social media with @inthesketchstudios.com. Right now, I'm working on a lot of experimental AI generative stuff and a lot of XR stuff. If you guys are interested in that, hit me up. I would love to have the conversation.
Amazing. Lovely. Great to have that. And again, Kevin, thank you for investing your time with us, for, spreading your experience. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, Engagers, and thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast. And if you want more interviews with amazing guests like Kevin, please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started on our email list, which is absolutely for free. We can be in contact. You'll be the first to know of our opportunities. What are we up to? Even some information that we don't publish in the podcast every now and then. And of course, before you go on to your next mission, before you click continue, remember to subscribe or follow using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.